One of them is simply this, that the Old Testament Jews trace themselves to one of them is simply this, that Abraham, the Old Testament Jews trace themselves to one of them is simply this, that Abraham, the Old Testament Jews trace themselves. So the Jews in the Old Testament, that Abraham, the Old Testament Jews said so that we are God's people because we are children of Abraham. That really for them was what defined being part of God's people, children of Abraham. We're a child of Abraham. We don't trace our family to Abraham. But what we see in the New Testament is that Christians are called what in Romans 4. But what we see in the New Testament Christians are called is that Christians are called what in the New Testament Christians are called children of Abraham. We're called children of Abraham. And so there is, that's just one example among many that show this very strong continuity between people. And so there is, let's just Jewish people, so we are God's people, shows we're Abraham's children. Very strong. If you're a Christian, you are a child of Abraham as well. Jewish people, so we are God's. Is that because you can trace your family through to Abraham? Very strong. If you're a Christian, you are a child of Abraham. And what Paul says is that whoever has no faith because of Christ is a child. If you're a Christian, you are a child of Abraham. What Paul says is that whoever has no faith because of Christ is a child. If you're a Christian, yeah, it does. So Jesus points out that in fact that was always the case. That was always the case. Yeah, it does. So right, Jesus points out that we're on page 4, and we're going to learn about the church now by the King's Tower, some of the Bible's pictures of the church, and some of the metaphors. We're going to learn about the church now that we see in the Bible's pictures, and some of the metaphors. Let's learn about. So, a picture of the church, we've already talked about, and Eden, the Garden of Eden, Genesis 2. So, now, what we want to do for each of these pictures is ask, who is Christ in this picture? What is Christ in this picture? Now, who are we in this picture? And what does that teach us about Christ in this picture? What should our response to that be? Now, who are we? So, if the Garden of Eden has, what does that teach us about Christ and Jesus is the creator, and we are also the Garden of Eden has, that teaches us that to be a part of the church, Jesus is the creator. For a part, we must go to that teaches us that to be a part of the church, Jesus is multiplied. For a part, Adam and Eve must go to how are we to be fruitful as the part of the church? Jesus is multiplied. For a part, by that, that's right, going out to how are we to be fruitful as the part of the church? Jesus is multiplied. Okay, that's right. That's why we started almost confused. Let's go to another picture of the church from the New Testament, where the church is likened to. Let's go to the body of Christ in particular. From the New Testament, see that where the church is likened to Colossians. So the church is likened to a body. Who is Christ in that body? He is the head, and we are the church is like that body. Who is Christ? Now, what does that teach us about how we should live as Christians? If we're part of the body, and Jesus is the head of that body. Who is Christ? Now, what does that teach us about how we should live? What does that imply about our body? And Jesus is the head of that body. Who is Christ? Yeah, we should be working together. What does that imply about our body? And Jesus is the head of that body. Yeah, we should be working out. Okay, so the head directs the body. We're supposed to do what the head directs us to do, and to carry out our role. Okay, so the head directs the body. That's right. Okay, let's think about the church as a bride, and this is, I think, one of the most surprising pictures of the church. The church is likened to a bride in the Bible. in Isaiah 54, in the Song of Songs, and Ephesians chapter 5. So if the church is a bride, what is Jesus in that picture? He is the bridegroom. We are the bride. Now, what does that teach us about how we are to be in the church? What should our response to that picture be?
No.
Yeah, we're supposed to love him as a bride loves her husband. I think, Amy, is your face still sore from your wedding 4 weeks ago? 3.5 weeks ago. 3.5 weeks ago. All right, Amy was about the happiest bride I've ever seen. And I'm sure her cheeks were really sore at the end of that day. No? But, you know, what a picture, though, of what the church is supposed to be like. The church is supposed to be in love with Jesus, the bridegroom, and to adore him, and to love him, and to love to be with him. And so this is, it also teaches us about Jesus' passion for his church. Don't you think that this is a very daring metaphor that the Bible uses? I mean, read this. Who can read the Song of Solomon without blushing? It's full of these expressions of intimate, romantic love between a husband and his bride. And this is a picture of the love of Jesus for his church and the love that the church should have for Jesus.
It's the words on this last Thursday. That was the study that we did. I got to join in.
Right.
I don't usually, but on Thursday morning, that song is what they're studying.
Okay.
And that was the last study. Was the symbolism of that we should have that much passion in our relationship with Christ.
With Christ.
Yeah.
And
and that sort of like that kind of awkwardness that, wow, okay. And yeah, so.
Yeah, it makes us blush, that's right. And there are two schools of thought, by the way, two schools of interpretation of the Song of Song. Some people say that the Song of Song is in the Bible to teach husbands and wives how much they should love and adore each other. And others say that the Song of Songs is really there to teach us about the love that Jesus has for his church, or God has for his church. Which is it? It's both of those. Yeah, it's both. If you read Puritan commentaries on the Song of Songs, now the Puritans get a bad rap, and they were definitely not anti-pleasure and anti-sex and that is a caricature. But if you read their commentaries on the Song of Songs, yes, they very much focus on this passionate love that God has for his church. And we should keep that picture of the church in mind.
And also Matthew 22, where he's preparing the feast, the parable, preparing the feast for the bridegroom.
Yes, so that's right, yes, the parables of the...
It shows a lot there about how the church is, isn't it? You know,
yes.
We don't respond to his invitations.
Well, the Old Testament actually takes this metaphor of the people of God as a bride, and it sometimes uses that in a negative way, doesn't it? To say that Israel has become like a wayward wife, an adulterous wife, yeah. So, and God's grief for that, the husband's grief for that waywardness. So that's really important, isn't it? If we're thinking about the church and the importance of the church, when we stray from God, he hurts and is pained just as much as a husband would be if his wife was to go astray. We have another picture of the church in the family. So a church is likened to a family or a household. And in that picture, Jesus is the firstborn of the family. And we are his brothers and sisters. And that teaches us about the love that we should have for Jesus, but also the love for each other as well. That's right. So, this puts it very powerfully, doesn't it? If you think of the church, you hear the word church and you are thinking of a building with a steep roof and a bell and a cross, and or if you think about the church as a family of brothers and sisters, and Jesus is the older brother, he's the firstborn, that's going to give you a much, much different picture of the church. That's going to make you feel much differently about the church, isn't it? So a cold, derelict building versus a family, a vibrant family with siblings that should be full of love and affection for one another and for the firstborn son. Here's another picture of the church. Jacob, the man Jacob. And I'm thinking here of Genesis 32, where Jacob is wrestling with an angel, and he finds out after this wrestling match that the angel is who? The angel is the angel of the Lord. It's God himself. Jacob is wrestling all night. I hope you know and are familiar with and love this passage as much as I love it. It's such a wonderful passage of Scripture. Jacob wrestling with God, the angel of the Lord, all through the night. What is the nature of that wrestling match? What does God say to Jacob? First, he says, "Let me go," doesn't he? And what does Jacob say? "I will not let you go until you bless me." So that's the nature of the wrestling match. It's actually Jacob holding on to God for dear life, and God, as it were, sort of trying to push Jacob away or distance himself from Jacob. There's a reason why God did that. And Jacob desperately holding on to God and saying, "I will not let you go until you bless me." And God touches Jacob's hip and lames him. And that shows us that God at any moment could have put an end to that wrestling match. It's God who orchestrated this all-night wrestling match, and God was being very gentle with Jacob, but at any moment he could have put an end to it, proven by the fact that he just touches his hip and lames Jacob. But the second thing is that Jacob is given a new name as a result of that wrestling match. And Jacob, which means what? Yeah, it means literally the grasper, doesn't it? The grasper or the deceiver becomes, God gives him a new name. What's his name?
Israel.
Israel. And what does Israel mean?
With God.
One who contends with God. One who contends with God. Jacob is given a new name that would remind him and all of his descendants of that night when he wrestled with God and said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." And this becomes the name of the entire nation, meaning what? That the nation of Israel was to be a nation of people who contended with God. In that same way, the nation was to be characterized by this holding on to God and saying to God, "I will not let you go until you bless me." And this is what it means to be part of the church. Israel, the church of the Old Testament, we are the new Israel. We are the children of Abraham. If we are in the church, then we must be like Jacob and grasp hold of God for dear life. Grasp hold of Jesus and say, "I will not let you go until you bless me." How can you pick a person who's... Yes, Steve.
Just before you go on, surely there are plenty of places in the Old Testament where it's the other way around. It's God hanging on to Israel has apostatized, and it's only because God is hanging on to them.
Yeah, so Stephen's pointed out that in really right through the Old Testament we see Israel actually rejecting God and God holding on to them. That is correct. So this is what Israel is supposed to be like. Yeah, very often they're not. They fail. They're not a true Israelite. But this is what they're supposed to be like. How can you identify, what does a person look like who does that in the church today? What does a person look like who is wrestling with God in that way, holding on to Him as though their life depended on it?
Jacob would be someone who's self-sufficient, who's trying their own ways
Yeah.
to get salvation.
Yeah,
Because he was always doing his own thing to
Yeah.
get what he wanted. And then an Israelite is someone who rests on the work of Jesus Christ for that salvation.
okay, so a Jacob, Felicity put that really well, is someone who's self-sufficient. An Israelite is someone who is dependent on God. Exactly. And what does that look like practically speaking? How would you notice someone? What would a person be doing?
Showing love for God by obedience.
Obeying God, yes.
Seeking his will.
Yeah, seeking His will. What else? What about
Fasting and praying.
fasting and praying? Yeah. So the prayerful person crying out to God for their needs, that's a person who is being like Israel. Yeah. The person who is hungrily reading this, devouring, that's a person who's holding on to God for dear life. You can pick that person because they're always reading this. They want to know it more. They come to theology class. Or, having said that, I know that it's not for everyone. And there are people who they can't come for whatever reason or don't want to come for whatever reason, that's fine. But the fact you are here is, to me, a healthy sign. You are people who want to know God better. You want to know about Jesus better. There's a hunger, and that's what we always want to see. I think the people who, let me just say it bluntly, the people who are at church every week show something of this tenacity of Israel. I need to be there. I need to be with God's people. I need to be hearing the word of God read and taught. I need to be praying with God's people. I need the fellowship of God's people. That, to me, shows the spirit of Israel, someone who is contending with God. Okay, Israel as a nation is a picture of the church. And within that picture, Jesus is the Redeemer, and we are the freed slaves. Another picture of the church as a nation, a holy nation. And in that picture, Jesus is the King, and we are His subjects who ought to obey Him and who long to be holy because it is a holy nation. Another picture of the church, a flock. And this is a very common picture of the church in the Old Testament, New Testament. And in that picture, Jesus is the shepherd, and we are the sheep, and we know the shepherd's voice, and we follow him, we depend on him. What do shepherds do for sheep, by the way? Three things mainly. Protect, attend, in other words, providing for them.
Bring them back when they go.
Yes, going out and bringing back the strays. So leading, protecting, providing, and let's add that fourth one of going and getting the strays. Yes. And that is, that's one of the really beautiful pictures of the church, isn't it? The church as a flock. And the word pastor, by the way, what's the basic meaning of that word?
Shepherd.
A shepherd, yeah. Pastor means shepherd, someone who is. And the pastor is supposed to be an under pastor to the head shepherd, that is Jesus. And doing the work of a pastor under Christ, he is the chief shepherd. And as a pastor, it is a tremendous comfort to me that Jesus is the shepherd. He's the chief shepherd. He's the shepherd of the cornerstone. I'm the under shepherd. If I thought I was the shepherd, that would be too crushing. So the fact that Jesus is caring for his sheep, leading and providing, is crucial. And good for you to know too, right? Yeah. Good for us all to know that. The church is pictured as a vine, and Jesus is the vine keeper. We are the branches, although you could add there that he's the vine himself. Sometimes he seems to be likened to a vine keeper who prunes the vine, but at other times he is the vine itself, and we are the branches that have to remain in the vine. Because what happens when it's tulip season now, isn't it? Or has that been gone? Nearly, okay. So I don't know how this happens, but every year tulips and daffodils and things start coming out of the ground at our place. I don't know why, I never put them there, they just come up every year, and it's wonderful to see. And what happens when you cut the tulip to take it inside, because you want to look at it inside? Well, it looks good for a bit, and then the petals start to fall off, and it starts to droop and fade. And so it no longer has that life-giving sap going into it. And so as Christians, we want to be connected to the vine. We wither and die if we're not connected. The church is also likened to a building, and Jesus to the cornerstone of that building. Now, what function does a cornerstone have?
Holds everything else together.
Okay, it holds everything else together.
Takes the weight,
Yes, it takes weight.
gives the shape.
Shape, yeah.
It defines the design, really.
Yes,
That's the first stone that's put down.
yeah, that's right.
On which everything else is
So
centered.
that's right, the cornerstone is placed and then the building built off the cornerstone. So it determines the direction and position of the building and the shape of the building. So the cornerstone determines where the building's going to be, what direction it's facing, what kind of a building it's going to be. And so the church is a building, having just labelled the fact that the church isn't a building, the New Testament says that it is a building metaphorically, not really, but metaphorically a building. And we are living stones, not mindless bricks in the wall, but living stones, alive and engaged part of that building, built on that foundation. The church is also likened to a temple, and Jesus is likened to a temple. We are likened to priests who serve in that temple. And what do priests do? They serve in the temple, they pray, there has to be purity, the temple's a holy place. The church is likened to the New Jerusalem. Jesus is the king of that city. In Revelation, he's described as the light of the city. We are the citizens who dwell in that city, who obey the king. The church is likened to an army. Jesus as the head of that army, we are the soldiers. The church is likened to a banquet, where Jesus is the host and we are the guests. The church is likened to golden lampstands, attended by Jesus. He's near to them, he is making sure that they have the oil to continue to burn. And we are those lamps. Now, why doesn't the Bible just make up its mind and say, well, the church is a flock, and Jesus is the shepherd, and you're the sheep. Live with that.
That's only part of the story.
Yeah, it's because even though that's very precious and teaches us wonderful truths about who Jesus is and who we are, that's not the whole story, is it, about the church? Because, for example, if we were just a flock and Jesus is the shepherd and we're the sheep, well, then we'd be pretty quickly forgetting that we are also supposed to be soldiers in an army. Because sheep aren't very warlike, are they?
No.
And if we just thought of the church as a bride and Jesus as the bridegroom, what might be, if that's all we thought of the church as being, what might be neglected? Which emphasises the love and affection between.
Jesus is the king and we subjects.
Yeah, that's right, that he's the king and we obey the king. That's right. And so that's why we need to have all of these pictures that the Bible gives us. When we think about the church, let's think about all of these pictures of the church. They all teach something very important. And it gives us a very rounded and a deeper and rounder view of the church. What's your favourite of these? Just give my throat a bit of a rest. An army, okay. And which church, by the way, really went to town on that particular? The Salvation Army, yeah. The Salvation Army really picked up on that metaphor for the church and ran hard with it. And in the Salvation Army, you don't have pastors, you have officers, that's right. You have lieutenants, captains, colonels, and so on, majors. Yeah, so Salvation Army really picked up on that one part of the church. Any favourites then?
Well, I prefer the family.
The family, okay. Why is that, Steve?
I just prefer to think of other Christians as brothers and sisters.
Yeah, okay. Not just as fellow sheep or fellow
Well, definitely not fellow
soldiers.
sheep.
Yeah.
Now, I was a farmer for long enough to know that sheep are pretty stupid. And I understand a few words there.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
I mean, I like the sheep one, more not about us as sheep, but as Christ as being the shepherd, and
Right.
the way that, you know, the pictures that are given in the Bible about him tending his flock and,
Yeah.
and the tenderness that, the way he leads and the way he cares for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, you know, it depends where you are in life as to what, you know, jumps out at you,
Yeah.
what's important to you at
Yeah.
a given point. But
And something we didn't actually say here was that the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, right? That's from John
Yeah,
chapter 10.
ultimately, yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. What about, I mean, I just love this one. You can probably tell because I really focus on that, but I just love that picture of the church as contending with God. What about the bride? Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? So we have these pictures of the church, and I hope that even that will inspire you to a deeper and richer view of the church and a greater love for the church, just thinking about these wonderful pictures. So we're going to have a break now, and it is 8:10. Let's take 15 minutes, and we're not going to look at every word of the remaining 4 pages, but we'll look at the highlights. So the tea and coffee's out in the passageway. Grab a hot drink, grab a biscuit, and we'll try to arrange the room a little bit better during the break as well, because it doesn't look very comfortable for people back there. Well, you two look too comfortable. Yeah. Okay, see you at 25 past.
Dave, you got the live streaming going out there?
Yeah.
I was just about to try to.
that's good. And then I'm going to throw people this
Yeah, no.
Okay, well, let's keep going. I know I've cut some time a little bit short. Okay. Hopefully that's working. And welcome to people on YouTube. So apparently that's all working out, which is good. And we are on page 5, and we're going to look at spend a little bit of time looking at the nature of the church, and then a bit of time looking at the attributes of the church. And we are on page 5, and we're going to... Is that me?
Yeah.
That's like a long echo, isn't it? Yeah. And then a bit of time looking at the attributes of the church. Okay. All right, good. Page 5, the nature of the church. And these 3 points will, again, give us a deeper understanding of the church, a more rounded understanding of the church. Okay, I can still hear myself. I feel so sorry for you to listen to that all the time. Okay. So we can think about the visible and invisible church. So we can talk about the nature of the church, and we can talk about the church visible. So let's use this rough diagram that we used with soteriology. If this is the visible church. Now, what does the visible church include? Who's in the visible church? Who do we, and then the world is outside of the church. Who would we put in here? Yes, us.
All the saints alive today.
Okay, so
All professing Christians.
all professing Christians. Yeah, I think we're getting more precise. Yeah, professing Christians, baptized. We are in here, so those who profess to be Christians. But we know that not everyone who professes to be a Christian is really a Christian. And so from that visible church, professing Christians are visible. You can see them, you hear them, you see what they do. But within that group, we have the invisible church, meaning the elect within the visible church. And so we are distinguishing here between those in the church who are elect, who are truly Christian, and those that are what we might call nominally Christian. Now, if you come across that word nominal, yeah, so it comes from the Greek word, no, it doesn't. it's just related to the word name. Nominally, it's related to the word in name only, that's correct. So nominally, I was going down the wrong path there. So Jesus said that in the parable of the sower, that there was seed that fell on rocky places. And that seed represented people who heard the word and received it with joy. And so Jesus said that there will be people who hear the gospel and who receive it with joy, but they don't have roots. And when trouble or persecution comes, they fall away. So can you see how Jesus there distinguishes this wheat that grows up in the rocky ground? How does it look any different to the wheat that's growing up in the good ground? Well, at first, there's no apparent difference, is there? In fact, they both look good. But it's only later, when the trouble and persecution comes, that some of those plants die and wither. And so Jesus here is distinguishing between there is the visible church, all the wheat growing up, but then there is some that dies and withers, and some that remains sound. So he draws that distinction. And he also talks in the parable of the wheat and the weeds about the wheat and the weeds that grow up together. They both might look good, and they are only separated at the harvest time. In Romans chapter 2, Paul says that a man is not a Jew if he is only one outwardly, nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a man is a Jew if he is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a man's praise is not from man, but from God. And so Paul teaches us that in Israel there were many people who outwardly belonged to the nation of Israel. These men were circumcised, they'd received the sign of belonging to Israel, but their hearts were in the wrong place. And so the Bible teaches us that not all who appear in the church are truly saved. And that in fact, there's an old saying, you might have heard it, that when we die and go to heaven, that there will be two surprises. And you might have heard people talk about this. We'll be surprised at who we do see, and we'll be surprised at who we don't see. Yeah, that's right. And that acknowledges the fact that we don't, I can't look into your hearts, and you can't look into mine. You all appear to me to be Christians, but only the Lord knows that. And that's what this visible and invisible distinction is teaching us, is reminding us of. It doesn't mean that there are two churches, by the way. There's one church, but it means that there are two ways of looking at the church. You can look at the church as the church visible, understanding that within that visible church, not everyone is a true Christian. Or you can look at the church in its invisible form as the elect, and knowing that all of those people are saved and belong to God. Why is this important, by the way? Why is it important that we keep this in mind?
So that you keep preaching the gospel message and preaching to the unsaved as well.
Okay, so Lynn said, so that we keep preaching the gospel. Exactly right. It is a huge mistake for any pastor to assume that all the people sitting in front of him are saved. It's a huge mistake. And that's why Jesus said, within the visible church, there will be those who don't yet belong to him. And so pastors must make a point of always preaching the gospel. And we never get tired. The elect love to hear the gospel. They never get tired of hearing it. They love it. And those who are not saved need to hear it. And so it's never a wasted thing, is it, to preach the gospel to the church, because God's people love to hear it, and they need to continue to be built up by it, and those who are not yet saved need to hear it. We can also think about the church as militant and triumphant. The church militant and the church triumphant. And this distinguishes basically the church on earth now, us, and who's the church triumphant? It is those who have died and gone to heaven. Yeah, Christians who have died and gone to heaven. So we're in the fight, and our brothers and sisters who have gone before us and who have died, the fight for them is over. And Jesus said to the thief on the cross, today you will be with me, not on another battlefield, but in paradise. That's right. And when Stephen died, I mean, what a picture of the church militant. Stephen preaching the gospel, a hostile audience. They drag him out and stone him to death. That's the church militant. At the moment of his death, Christ is there standing to receive him. And then he joins the church triumph. The fight is over for Stephen at that point. Fight's over. Now he's part of the victorious church. And so, why is this important? Why is it important for us to keep in mind that there is a militant and a triumphant aspect to the church?
We're in a spiritual warfare.
Okay, so if we didn't know this, then we wouldn't understand. I mean, the Christian life is so hard, and this is why it's hard, because we're in a fight.
Yeah.
The
If you
spiritual
didn't have
warfare.
that bit, then that bit would just be a hard slog
Yeah.
for no reason.
Yeah, yeah, and that's right. If you're a Christian and you thought that, isn't it supposed to be like this? Isn't it supposed to be paradise and the fight? The fight's over, the struggle's over. You'd be very quickly discouraged. You'd think there was something wrong. So this reminds us that we are in the fight, but it also reminds us that the fight is brief, short. Soon it's going to be over, and then we get to rest. And what metaphors does the New Testament use for the Christian life? It talks about the Christian life as being like a battlefield. We are soldiers who have to stand firm on the battlefield. Describes the Christian life as a sprint, not a sprint, but a marathon race, a long race. That's right. And
We have to put on the armour of Christ.
we have to put on the armour of God. Sometimes the Christian life is described as Paul talks about wrestling. We're like wrestlers, Olympic wrestlers. And so this reminds us that the Christian life is one of struggle, but not for long. We struggle. And when we're in heaven, we're going to look back at, we're in the now. It feels so long and hard, and when's this ever going to end? But when we're in heaven, we'll look back at this and it will seem like a finger click, I think, and the struggle will be over. Someone who is promoted to glory. I love that, because you've got the army and you're promoted in the army. Well, now this is the ultimate promotion. You're promoted to glory. The fight's over. You're part of the church triumphant. And Berkhoff points out that this distinction reflects, by the way, the humiliation and exaltation of Christ. So Christ in his humiliation, that was a struggle. And then there's his exaltation where he is triumphant. So I like that correspondence between Christology and ecclesiology and the church and our Lord Jesus. Over the page, I'm not going to say too much about the church as institution and organism. And Berkhoff has a fair bit to say about it. And I was really trying to understand what he was getting at here. And I believe what he's getting at is that this reminds us that the church has certain institutional structures, like what? Certain forms and structures. For example, governance. That's right. We have what we call the offices of the church. Who are the offices of the church in the Presbyterian Church?
Elders.
Elders and deacons are what we call the office. They bear an office. They have been given a task to do in the church. What are some of the institutional structures of the church?
Administrations.
So there's administration, yeah. What about the Sunday gathering? Right, that's a stated gathering. The church gathers 10 o'clock Sunday morning. What about the baptism role, the membership role? Did they have roles? Did they do paperwork in the early church? I mean,
They kept count,
yeah,
because on Pentecost it was 5,000 people.
they kept count of people.
They kept count.
Yeah. And Paul talks about lists of widows, by the way. He talks about lists, and I've put that down there in 1 Timothy 5. No widow may be put on the list of widows. So I think sometimes we think of the early church as being very laissez-faire, people meeting in someone's lounge room, and it's all very organic and we are so structured now, we're so institutionalized now, and I love the church, but I hate the institutional church. You often hear people talking like this. By the way, a home fellowship, which is wonderful, meeting in someone's lounge room, what happens if that actually goes really well? What happens when it goes really well? People start to, it starts to grow in number. What happens when it starts to grow in number?
Eventually fills up.
Okay, well,
They have to find another building.
they have to find another building. Now, when they found the other building, who's going to put out the chairs? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to play the music now? I mean, you had old Harry playing the guitar in the lounge room, and everyone loved that. But now you're in a building, and now needs to be a bit more organised, right? And so I've actually seen this again and again, where you've got Christians who are saying, I can't stand all this institutionalism. So let's start a home fellowship, and this is lovely. And it grows, it takes off. Well, I don't really want to do the dishes every week, so let's now have a roster. And as the church grows, we need elders. And we need, now there's people starting to come in and looking after, we need deacons. And structure is not a curse, it's a blessing. It's a curse when it drives things and where it becomes an end in itself. Obviously that is wrong, but good structure serves the church and is a blessing to the church. And what I believe Berkhoff is getting at is that we need to remember that the church does have its institutionalized aspects. It has office bearers, it has stated times of meeting, it has pastoral care lists, it does all that, and it's an organism in that it is a body of people. And now Cornerstone, when is Cornerstone Cornerstone? I'm sorry if you're not at Cornerstone, but I'm just using the example of my own church. When is Cornerstone Cornerstone? Is it only 10 o'clock Sunday morning when we're all in this building here? No. We are Cornerstone, we are the church all the time, wherever we are, in our families, on campus, in the workplace. That reminds us that the church is an organism, a living body who are out in the community, serving in their families, in their schools, in their workplaces. And so I think that this reminds us of two important parts of the church. Okay, now here's something really interesting in the New Testament, that the New Testament describes the church locally. I'm down at point 4 on page 6. So Romans 16 verse 5, Paul says, Greet also the church that meets at their house. So he refers to a house church there. 1 Corinthians 16:19, he talks about another church that meets in a house over the page. Colossians 4, another reference to a church meeting in a house. So what this means is that let's say we're talking about the city of Jerusalem. Now, how many Christians were there in the first century in the city of Jerusalem? roughly speaking. There were thousands, right? The book of Acts tells us that there were thousands of them. And so, and this tells us that Christians were in the habit of meeting even in people's homes. And so if we've got the city of Jerusalem, you've got a house fellowship here, house fellowship here, you might have an upper room fellowship there. What do we call each of these things here? We call them a?
Congregation.
Well, what does Paul call them? Greet the church. So this house fellowship, that's a church. That's a church. That's a church. Now, over the page 7, Acts 8 verse 1. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church at Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. What is Luke doing here? He is saying that he's thinking about the church collectively now in Jerusalem, and what does he call it? The church. So this is the church in Jerusalem. That's a church, that's a church. But together they also make a church. Now in Acts 9, this is taken a step further because Luke refers to the church throughout Judea, Galilee and Samaria enjoying a time of peace. Now Jerusalem was in what region of Israel? It was in the region of Judea. And so what Luke is saying is that if this is Judea, well, you've got the church in Jerusalem, but you've got the church in, let's say, Bethlehem as well, which might also have its own fellowships. But then you've got the church in Samaria. And this is where I'm running out of whiteboard, right? Because we could, in Samaria, we could have these house fellowships, but also Samaria was a region. And so within the towns of Samaria, you can also have these collective churches. And then you've got Galilee as well. But here's the really interesting thing about Acts 9. Luke describes all of this as
The church.
the church. All of it. So this is giving us a very, very intriguing picture of the church. And you might be thinking, where is this going? Where is this going? Well, here's where it's going. What this means is that the church in the entire region of Israel was the church. And this, well, let's talk about the church. The church in Jerusalem, is that a fraction of the church? Is that 5% of the church? That's not what Luke's saying. He's saying that the church in Jerusalem is the church.